أعلن افتتاح الجلسة الثانية للدورة 59.
I call to order the second meeting of the 59th session of the Commission on Social Development. We will begin with item 2 on the agenda, the election of members of the Bureau. You will recall that in accordance with the principles of geographical equity between the regions, today we have to elect regions from the member of the Latin America and Caribbean region. You will recall that during the first meeting of this 59th session, on the 19th of February 2020, the Commission elected Mr. Martin Martin of Argentina, and I was elected to serve as Vice Chair. The Chair has listed New York, and therefore the Latin America and Caribbean region has proposed Ms. Maria del Carmen Scef, the Ambassador of Argentina, as Chair of this 59th session of the Commission. In the absence of other candidacies, can I understand that the Commission wishes to elect Ms. Maria del Carmen Scef for this 59th session of the Commission on Social Development? Seeing no objections, it is so decided. I therefore declare the election of Ms. Maria del Carmen Scef, Ambassador of Argentina, as Chair of this 59th session of the Commission on Social Development, and I call her to approach the rostrum.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to convey particular greetings to the President of the General Assembly, President of the Economic and Social Council, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies. Particular greetings to my female colleagues who are with us, distinguished delegations, ladies and gentlemen. Also, particular greetings to the whole of civil society, and particularly those pertaining to older people, women and young people who are following us virtually. It is an honor for me to be elected as chair of the 59th session of the Commission for Social Development. And I am very pleased to welcome you all to the start of the substantive work of this session.
Quisiera iniciar esta
I'd like to begin this meeting by recalling the work of the ever-present Argentinian cartoonist and comic artist Kino, who is well known as the creator of our dear Mafalda. In the pictures, you can see members of the FAO meeting in Rome to try to resolve the issue of global hunger. We can also see members of the Security Council here, meeting in New York to try to resolve the problem of current global insecurity. Next, we can see ILO members gathered in Geneva to try to resolve the problem of global unemployment. And in the last picture, we have members of the Rosales family gathered in the Tachito slum to try to resolve their problems of hunger, insecurity, unemployment, their inability to send children to school, their lack of medical assistance, and lack of running water at home. The pictures from this work by Kino show us the important work of this Commission for Social Development, which must focus its work on the Rosales families around the whole world for the most vulnerable people. We're living at a time which is testing all paradigms. I'm sure that the moral imperative and the concrete action to be taken now is to prioritize the forgotten, those left behind, the invisible, the most vulnerable. The pandemic is much more than a disease that has taken away lives. The pandemic has revealed the insufficiencies of the system. It has taken away lives, but it has also taken away companies, jobs, and it has taken away entire economies. The pandemic has laid bare the problem of inequality, the problem of inequity, the problem of poverty, unfair and unequal conditions between countries and within countries. And for this reason, I reiterate that we are not just in one more session of this Commission for Social Development. This is a special session because it's our responsibility to follow up on the objectives of the Copenhagen Declaration and Programme of Action, to fight against poverty, achieve full employment, and foster social inclusion in light of current challenges imposed by the pandemic. Distinguished colleagues, we are meeting here to begin the 59th session, which this year has as its priority theme socially just transition towards sustainable development, the role of digital technologies in social development and the well-being of all. When last year the Commission decided on this topic, it was prescient because in the context of the pandemic, our societies were able to remain active and functional due to the role and thanks to the role of digital technologies. However, it has also revealed the need to make headway towards greater digital inclusion to ensure that nobody is left behind in this stage of the digital revolution. In this context, when the United Nations Secretary General recently shared his priorities for this year, 2021, he underscored that the pandemic has also highlighted an enormous gap in access to these tools, including great gender disparities. He also underlined that the world entered the digital era decades ago, but a fundamental challenge persists, closing the digital divide. I'm proud to share with you that in Argentina recently we established that fixed and mobile telephones, cable and internet television are public and essential services, and they are part of the universal basic service provision. Hence, their cost is regulated by the state so that those in the greatest difficulty can have effective access to them. We took this measure because we believe that all Argentinians have the right to access these services. And this is not a market-based issue, but rather one that depends on the presence of the state. In addition, as you can see, this week we have a considerable agenda of activities through which we will discuss this priority theme, and I hope to be able to count on your participation. This afternoon, we will launch the first high-level panel with government representatives to discuss the role of digital technologies in social development. This principal topic will be discussed on Friday by different relevant actors such as civil society, academia, and the private sector during the multiple stakeholder forum. Moreover, on Wednesday, we will be honoured by the participation of excellent United Nations officials who will help us to reflect on this phenomenon of the digital transformation. We'll benefit from the participation of representatives of regional economic commissions, of UN Women, and others. Tomorrow morning, I'll be honoured to moderate the ministerial forum which will address the promotion of multilateralism to achieve an inclusive, resilient and sustainable recovery from COVID-19 in the context of the Decade of Action and results in favour of sustainable development and its social dimension. This provides an opportunity for our ministers to discuss the type of multilateralism that we need, in which equality, sustainability, solidarity, and international cooperation are essential and key, and this to make progress towards a transformative recovery that guarantees that people have the rights that they have demanded for decades. As an emerging theme, we will analyse the social policies to promote a sustainable, inclusive and resilient recovery, building back better post-COVID-19 to achieve the 2030 agenda in the context of the Decade of Action and the achievement of sustainable development. As you can see, this is a topic that means that we need to reinterpret the commitments made by the international community in social development, bearing in mind the challenges of the tragedy that we are facing. In addition, this week, we will see the Civil Society Forum. This will host an interesting debate on the priority theme with representatives of NGOs around the world. During this presidency, I've encouraged the participation of young people for all of the activities of our session. And we believe that while this hybrid format might have its limitations, it also allows us to safeguard inclusive participation from various stakeholders wherever they might find themselves through virtual platforms. What we have ahead of us is an interesting set of activities, and I would like to thank all of you for your active, arduous and constructive participation during the informal consultation process for the resolution on the priority topic. We must admit that it is not easy to negotiate this draft resolution, but it is my aim to achieve a consensus document in which we can make specific contributions to the needs of our people. In the world in which we're living today, social well-being will not be possible without a digital transformation. For this reason, we need to be able to promote equality, bearing in mind inclusive digital transformation processes, facilitating interactivity through various channels with the state, and bearing in mind the part of the population that does not have adequate access to digital technologies or the abilities to use them, as well as the socioeconomic barriers that restrict their use. I'd also like to thank the other facilitators of the other resolutions that will be adopted during this session. Distinguished colleagues, it was not easy to organise this session, and for this reason I'd like to thank the Secretariat of the Commission and the Department of Economic and Social Affairs for their robust commitment and professionalism throughout this process. Moreover, allow me to underscore the work of members of the Bureau of the Commission, Sharifa Al-Nef from Qatar, Julie Opperman from Luxembourg, Michael Guadjo Kouako from Côte d'Ivoire, and Nicola Nenov from Bulgaria. This session would not have been possible without their considerable support. Allow me to close by paraphrasing Pope Francis. We cannot act alone. We always need to be part of a choir, which sometimes might sing out of tune, but which must always sing united together. I'm convinced that we can come out of this pandemic by working with solidarity and as a team to create fairer, more egalitarian, diverse and inclusive societies. Thank you very much to all of you.
Doy ahora la palabra
I now give the floor to His Excellency Volkan Bozkır, President of the General Assembly.
Madam Chair Lady, Excellencies, dear colleagues, I'd like to congratulate Her Excellency Ms. Maria del Carmen Secquef, Chair of the 59th Commission for Social Development and Permanent Representative of Argentina to the United Nations. I thank you for the opportunity to address you today. As the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 continue to threaten development gains globally, any discussion on social development is a welcome one. Excellencies, dear colleagues, allow me to be frank. We face the largest setback in socio-economic development since the Second World War. Decades of gains and untold resources are at risk of being wiped away if we do not act. This is unacceptable. 2020 was supposed to be the year we kicked off the decade of action to accelerate Agenda 2030. Instead, we stand at the precipice of disaster. Forgive me for sounding dramatic, but if not now, when millions are relegated to poverty, when women's rights have been eroded and children are unable to access school, when famine and tragedy are once again filling our screens, there is no time like the present for us to act with urgency that the situation has bequeathed us. The COVID-19 pandemic, for all its tragedies, has unlocked incredible resources and political will. So there is an opportunity here to change our development trajectory to be truly transformational. Doing so requires that we align recovery efforts with the SDGs. These 17 goals and their myriad of concrete targets offer a clear blueprint to a sustainable, resilient world if we are willing to make a truly forward-looking effort to recover better. This will not be easy. We need to have a new social contract that prioritizes addressing the root causes of inequality and vulnerability. Key to this is prioritizing equal opportunities and using recovery to close the gaps we see across the SDGs. This includes expanding access to education and working with partners to ensure that education curriculums reflect the modern world, including new technologies. It means investing in the infrastructure and partnerships that investors and governments need to move into the world of tomorrow. And it means closing the digital divide and helping ensure that all people stand to benefit from innovations we see happening around us. On each of these points, I am encouraged that the UN development system, continues to support countries in need and are prioritizing the alignment of national and local development plans with COVID-19 recovery and the SDGs. Dear colleagues, before closing, allow me to emphasize that our recovery, in whatever shape it takes, must continue to be people-centered. Social policy has a key role to play in mitigating and overcoming the negative impacts of COVID-19, in particular, the impact on disadvantaged and vulnerable populations. Special attention must be made to reach all people, however remote, however disadvantaged. The specific needs of people who have been hit the hardest during the crisis must be taken into account and reflected in recovery planning. The Copenhagen Declaration and Plan of Action put people at the center of development and remains as relevant today as ever. As countries face the social and economic fallouts of the COVID-19 crisis, there is a need for visionary action, for solidarity, for multilateral cooperation, and above all else, for transformation. The challenges we face today, from COVID-19 to climate to inequality, all go hand in hand. Our efforts must be equally as reinforcing if we are to overcome them. Now is not the time for hesitancy. So I thank you very much, and I'm happy that you allowed me to address you in this very important meeting. Have a good meeting.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your statement. We will now hear a statement by His Excellency Munir Akram, President of the Economic and Social Council.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to join you at the opening of the 59th session of the Commission for Social Development. This year, we are meeting under uncertain circumstances. The fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage economies and societies. The development of vaccines against the disease is a hopeful sign. However, it is painful to witness that it would not be available for the majority of peoples living in the global south for several years. The COVID-19 pandemic is a stark reminder of the key role social development plays in protecting people's lives and livelihoods as well as the planet. Social development is one of the critical pillars like economic and environment for making the world more sustainable and resilient. Excellencies, Article 55 of the UN Charter entrusted the Economic and Social Council with a mandate to pursue international cooperation to promote, and I quote, better lives in larger freedoms, unquote. The World Summit on Social Development was convened on the recommendation of the Commission on Social Development, one of the functional commissions of ECOSOC. The outcome of the World Social Summit 25 years ago contained the notion of transformative resilience. This is now among the main principles of the 2030 Agenda. The past 25 years have witnessed extraordinary progress in human and social development, with a reduction in poverty, higher education standards, employment growth, rising incomes, and longer lives for hundreds of millions of the world's population. However, despite the progress, inequalities have risen to an unprecedented level. Today, 26 people own half the world's wealth. Our Secretary General has rightly pointed out during his Nelson Mandela lecture last July, and I quote, inequality is the hallmark of our times, unquote. The current crisis has put into bold relief these existing vulnerabilities and inequalities of our current financial and economic architecture. While the virus knows no borders, it is painfully obvious that the poor and vulnerable countries and peoples are impacted the most. The difference in amount of the stimulus packages that have been injected between the developed economies and the developing economies would dictate that the time of recovery of countries will be different. Advanced purchase agreements for the COVID-19 vaccine have also created vaccine inequality among nations. I believe that the lessons learned in implementing the outcome of the World Summit could help countries in what the Secretary General has called building back better. We need to foster transformative resilience by choosing policies that tackle high and rising inequality based on age, gender, location, and other factors, and for fostering the social inclusion of disadvantaged groups, communities, and individuals. We must choose policies that empower people and communities to become more resilient and offer multiple opportunities for decent work and social and economic transformation. The current crisis is a clear indication that business as usual cannot continue. A socially just transition towards sustainable development is critical in our efforts to enable more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable recovery and to achieve the goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the pace of digital transformation, which is expected to further exacerbate inequalities by widening the existing digital divide. As I pointed out earlier, the existing digital divide could become the new face of the development divide. Therefore, there is an urgent need to tackle factors behind the digital divide, which include lack of infrastructure, the high cost of digital equipment, lack of digital skills and literacy, and the absence of relevant content in local languages. Closing the digital divide requires significant investment in infrastructure to connect people. Sustainable infrastructure is fundamental for achieving all the SDGs, for it is a vehicle for transitioning towards a more resource efficient and greener economies and a prerequisite for inclusive growth. As highlighted by the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, achieving universal access to broadband will require an estimated $428 billion. Affordability is another key obstacle to closing the digital divide, especially for marginalized groups and poor rural communities. To tackle digital skills and literacy, there is an urgent need to invest in people by improving access to quality education. We need also to strengthen international cooperation to build a digitalized global economy accompanied by necessary regulation and fair competition. The Secretary General has proposed a roadmap for digital cooperation. I believe progress on this is essential to bridge the digital divide. Excellencies, this is the time for innovation, creativity, and solidarity. I look forward to contributions of the Commission for Social Development as we build back better during the decade of action. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the President of the Economic and Social Council for his statement. We will now hear a statement by the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Liu Zhenmin.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to join you at this opening of the 59th session of the Commission for Social Development. The priority theme is a socially just transition towards sustainable development, the role of digital technologies and social development and well-being of all. This theme has high relevance to supporting member states in their efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and recover better from the tragic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. Countries across the world are facing daunting challenges to the social fabric of their societies. The pandemic is erasing hard-won progress on the sustainable development goals and compounding the climate emergency. As the countries struggle to recover, the long-term outcomes of these crises will be determined by policy responses. We need decisive, innovative, and bold action in order to limit their negative socio-economic effects. And here, digital technologies play a crucial role. Indeed, their rapid advance has brought tremendous benefits, especially as social interactions are restricted to contain the spread of the virus. In this context, digital tools such as e-health, remote learning platforms, and e-commerce have been essential in providing access to health, education, and essential goods during the pandemic. It is further evident that advances in technology are critical for the achievement of all SDGs. However, to fully harness the benefits of digital technology, rapid action is needed to close the digital divide, promote digital inclusion, and make the internet available to the 3.7 billion people who are not online yet. To lay the foundations of an inclusive digital economy, investment in ICT infrastructure is critical. So to enabling ICT regulatory environment that promotes competition and equitable access. Digital inclusion also requires that vulnerable groups are equipped with capacities to access and use digital platforms. Improving accessibility and affordability is paramount to reducing the digital divide. Excellencies, a socially just transition to sustainable development is more important than ever. High and rising inequalities, a climate crisis, and unsustainable consumption and production patterns are the current norm. They continue to take a toll on social development and on people's well-being, especially the most vulnerable. A socially just transition, therefore, entails a rethinking of economic activity, not as an end in itself, but rather as a means for advancing human well-being and capabilities while protecting the environment. The objective of economic policies and development must have the well-being of people at the center. That is why forging a better, more sustainable recovery calls for reimagining the social contract in order to address the root causes of inequality and vulnerability. Allow me to highlight 4 key priorities on the way forward. First, a new social contract needs to guarantee quality public services that promote equal opportunity, universal social protection systems that foster economic security, and robust public institutions that ensure equal rights. Second, promoting equal opportunity also means investing in labor institutions. It requires labor regulations and employment contracts that provide decent work, especially for workers in the gig economy, the care economy, and related sectors. Third, fostering economic security is an imperative. Without a doubt, the rapid pace of technology has profound implications for the future of work. This calls for nationally appropriate social protection systems on the floors. Without social protection, workers have to choose between their health and that of others, and economic hardship. Fourth, closing the digital divide is a must. Actions are urgently needed to increase the rollout of the necessary infrastructure while making internet connection more affordable. Make digital content accessible, including through local language content as well as disability enabling support, and address specific barriers to digital inclusion faced by marginalized groups and communities, in particular women and girls, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and elder persons. Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, a better future is within our reach. We have seen achievements in digital technologies implemented at the scale never seen before. But a socially just transition towards sustainable development is a global endeavor that requires collective action. I wish you a fruitful session of the Commission for Social Development and look forward to the outcome of your deliberations. I thank you.
Damos las gracias.
I thank the Undersecretary General of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs for his statement. We will now hear a statement by Ms. Monica Jahangir Chowdhury, co-chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development.
Good morning, Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maria Fornella Oninger, and I'm co-chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development.
And my name is Monica Jahangir Chowdhury, the other co-chair of the committee. On behalf of the committee, we thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Digital technology has shrunk the planet, galvanized voices for social change, and transformed the way we live forever. The pandemic has revealed in real time that digital transformation can bring impressive benefits for social progress, but can also result in deepening already existing inequalities, more discrimination, loss of basic rights, and social protection. Spread of misinformation, breach of privacy, and the impact of social media on mental health and well-being are also major concerns that demand our attention. We bring to you today a message of hope, but at the same time, a message of urgency.
Inspired by the priority theme of the Commission, our NGO committee worked relentlessly to enable and enhance the participation of grassroots organization and civil society organization through different mediums. For the first time ever, our civil society declaration has been open for public endorsement and was signed by over 480 civil society organizations and individuals to this day. The 10 recommendations from this declaration will be presented shortly. People all over the world want to be seen and heard as we collectively seek a just transition. More than 70 videos from grassroots voices and experiences from all continents and all walks of life were sent to us. A clear and direct illustration that the foundational concept of we the peoples from the UN Charter is alive today more than ever, and that everyone's voices matter. From the Indian teenager using mobile banking to the grandparent in Europe using social media to stay in touch with family during the pandemic, or the alert citizen worried about the spread of fake news on social media, or the teacher in rural Zambia worried about his student not able to connect to internet, or indigenous communities that are being even more excluded, disconnected, and disempowered.
These are indeed powerful examples of the extent to which internet access and content are transforming the lives of individuals and communities, shaping their future, affecting their well-being, and at times their mere survival.
All around the world, a large part of the global population lacks basic access to fundamental rights, such as education, healthcare, housing. In times of global pandemic, these deprivations are accumulated and compounded with the lack of access to internet or electronic devices. Our recommendations: internet connection must be established as a fundamental right for all. Government must prioritize digital literacy training and provide digital access to social protection services based on a human rights approach that prevents abuses, dehumanization, and stigmatization based on technological design bias.
Poverty reduction has slowed down in the last 5 years, and inequalities are on the rise. The critical investments needed to achieve a just transition to sustainable development remain underfunded. We need to bring back the notion that citizens, as owners of pensions and savings, are at the center of the economy. Our recommendations: the financing for development process must be strengthened by stemming illicit financial flows, by restructuring sovereign debt, and taking other related actions for a more equitable distribution of resources. Science and technology must be at the heart of North-South cooperation and must include technology transfer and investment in infrastructure capabilities.
Global digital technology must be guided by effective and responsive digital governance formulated from public input, active participation from the grassroots, and accountability of all those involved. Our recommendations: to improve digital inclusion, internet, data, and artificial intelligence must be considered as digital public goods. Protection are particularly needed with regards to digital identity, online harassment, privacy, online content, and data. All regulatory framework must be adapted to the new realities so that digital technology can lead the world into a socially just transition to sustainable development.
To conclude, we, the representatives of civil society, put our trust in you, the member states, the industry, and the United Nations system as a whole to harness the transformational power of the fourth industrial revolution to build better societies guided by the values of justice, equity, security, and transparency.
Let us join forces and harness the immense potential of digital technology for the benefit of all, accelerating the global transition to sustainable development based on inclusion, the respect of human rights, and the respect of human dignity. Merci.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the co-chairs of the NGO Committee on Social Development for their statement. We will now hear a statement by a youth representative, Ms. Marwa Azelmat, a policy advocacy coordinator for the Women's Rights Programme at the Association for Progressive Communications.
Doy entonces la...
I now give the floor to the representative or the youth representative.
Good morning, Chair, Under Secretary General, and esteemed guests. I am Marwa Zelmat from Morocco, and I'm here today as part of the Young Experts on Technology for Health Council, speaking on behalf of the UN Major Group for Children and Youth, the General Assembly mandated space for young people at the United Nations. We're encouraged by recent progress made with the UN Secretary General's Roadmap on Digital Cooperation, the UN Technology Facilitation Mechanism, the Commission on Science and Technology, among others. We stand ready to support these and future initiatives and look forward to working collaboratively to foster meaningful youth engagement that promotes intergenerational decision-making. We're only as strongest as our weakest health system, quoting the UN Secretary General. The COVID-19 crisis brought to the fore a global sense of urgency with respect to the role of digital technologies on social development and well-being for all. The world observed worrying trends around the ill-preparedness of sometimes already tenuous systems to accommodate huge virtual traffics, the impromptu shift in work modalities, health, legal, social services made it clear that in order to spur recovery and build back better, more concerted efforts should be deployed against the backdrop of a people-centered development at large beyond emergency-driven measures. As we tip away at the 2030 objectives, we must collectively remind ourselves that digital technologies are public goods and should be safeguarded as such. They cannot be part of any profit-ridden equation at the expense of fundamental human rights and freedoms. In 2020, new ITU data reveal growing internet uptake but widening digital divides. Although coined as digital natives, 1.3 billion school-age youth do not have internet connection in their homes. They're restricted from the transformative social development opportunities digital technologies entail. Digital technologies are not standalone products, services, and tools. Questions of privilege extend to the politics of data, algorithms, and the means through which they're conceived in more ways than once, whereby young people are disproportionately impacted at the intersection of race, gender, class, religion, to name just few variables. A conducive digital environment should be supportive of a whole new thinking youth continuum of the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of all digital-related policies in all political, economic, societal spheres for digital technologies to serve the hopes and the concerns of the largest and the youngest population history has ever witnessed. Online and digital-enabled experiences are rife in threats to the well-being of all, and young people are no exception. The UNODC Global Cyber Program registered rampant cyber attacks and inadvertent risks of sexual exploitation, personal sensitive data breaches, in light of the likely increased amount of time spent online for educational, professional, and social purposes during confinement measures. Young people are massively exposed to health-related fake news and disinformation campaigns, taking a toll on their overall state of mental health, even more so shaking the social fabric and thwarting a social and just transition towards sustainable development. More locally informed research programs should be funded to look into the adverse effects digital technologies have on mental health for children, adolescents, and young adults along the lines of gender, sexual orientation, and age, while being mindful of the variety of experiences young people bring about online as a non-homogeneous group. Alongside the protection of young people, a particular attention should be paid into their participation in governance and decision-making spaces. The relationship between digital technologies and social development is multifaceted, evolving, and non-binding. The advent of artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies is inherently multisectoral and retain the vast potential to unlock significantly ways for better progress. If combined with a diverse human potential and shaped by ethically oriented practices, digital technologies will accelerate the current strides in social development. Chair, even as we gather virtually today, our presence and concern is a testament to the will, optimism, and abilities of many countries, policymakers, and civil society. I hope, as a youth myself, that this discussion in this commission will increase our capacity to usher in a decade of greatest digital cooperation. Thank you very much.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the youth representative for her statement. I now invite the Commission to continue its consideration of Agenda Item 1 of its provisional agenda, election of officers, in order to elect the remaining members of the Bureau of the Commission. The Commission will recall that at its first meeting, held on the 19th of February 2020, it elected Ms. Sharifa Youssef Al-Nef of Qatar to serve as Vice Chair of the 59th session. Members of the Commission will further recall that the election of the remaining members of the Bureau from the African states, Eastern European states, and the Western European and other states was postponed, on the understanding that upon the endorsement by the regional groups for membership, the endorsed member of the Commission would be able to participate fully in Bureau meetings in preparation for the Commission's 59th session. I'm therefore pleased to inform the Commission that the African states have endorsed the candidature of Mr. Michel Kouadio Kouakou, Councillor at the Permanent Mission of Côte d'Ivoire. The Western European and other states have endorsed the candidature of Ms. Julie Opperman, Attaché at the Permanent Mission of Luxembourg. And the Eastern European states have endorsed the candidature of Mr. Nikola Nenov, Attaché at the Permanent Mission of Bulgaria. The three candidates have been endorsed as vice chairs of the 59th session. In the absence of any other nominations, may I take it that the Commission wishes to elect by acclamation Mr. Kouadio Michael Kouakou of Côte d'Ivoire and Ms. Julie Opperman of Luxembourg, and to re-elect Mr. Nikola Nenov of Bulgaria as vice chairs of the 59th session of the Commission for Social Development. I hear no objection. It is so decided. On behalf of the Commission, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Kouadio Michael Kouakou of Côte d'Ivoire, Mr. Julie Opperman of Luxembourg, and Mr. Nikola Nenov of Bulgaria on their election. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Vice President Sharifa of Qatar for her intense and arduous work. In addition, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of my fellow Bureau members for their support. Further, I wish to inform the Commission that following consultations within the Bureau, it has been agreed that our distinguished Vice Chair, Mr. Kouadio Michel Kouakou of Côte d'Ivoire, will also assume the responsibilities of rapporteur for this session of the Commission. I therefore congratulate Mr. Kouakou on this appointment. I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 2, entitled Adoption of the Agenda and Other Organisational Matters. The provisional agenda for this session is contained in document E/CN.5/2021/1, and the proposed organisation of work is contained in document E/CN.5/2021/1/add1. The agenda is therefore adopted, and I invite the Commission to first consider the provisional agenda for this session as contained in document E/CN5/2021/1. The provisional agenda and the documentation for the 59th session were approved by the Economic and Social Council in its decision 2020/212. May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the provisional agenda? I hear no objections. It is so decided. I now invite the Commission to turn to the proposed organisation of work as contained in document E/CN5/2021/1/add1. First, let me make a few general comments about the proposed modalities and conduct of our work. This session, the Commission is operating under extraordinary circumstances, given the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. As such, the proposed modalities of the Commission for this session comprise a hybrid model of formal, in-person meetings as well as informal virtual meetings. These modalities are proposed on an exceptional basis and do not constitute a precedent for the work of the Commission. This session will include 2 in-person formal meetings, the first being this present meeting, and the second to be held on Wednesday, 17th of February, in the combined conference rooms 1, 2 and 3. The opening of the Commission's 60th session will immediately follow the closing of the 59th session on the 17th of February for the purposes of holding elections. Following consultations with Member States, the Bureau has identified these hybrid modalities as, under the current circumstances, the most suitable way forward for the Commission to deliver on its mandates. I would like to seek your cooperation in starting all meetings on time at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. sharp in order to make optimum use of the conference resources allocated to the Commission. I would also like to make the following proposals concerning the time limits for statements during the general discussion. Statements to be made on behalf of groups shall not exceed 12 minutes. Statements by individual delegations shall not exceed 7 minutes. Statements made by intergovernmental organizations and entities of the United Nations system shall not exceed 5 minutes. And statements to be given by non-governmental organizations shall not exceed 3 minutes. As communicated to Member States on the 4th of February, I would propose to revise the provisional organisation of work contained in document E/CN5/2021/1/add1 to include sub-item B of agenda item 4, entitled United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, on the morning of Wednesday, 17th of February, in addition to its inclusion at this present meeting. This will enable this Commission to take action under this sub-item if it should so decide after hearing the presentation of reports today. May I take it that the Commission wishes to approve the proposed modalities and the organisation of work contained in document E/CN5/2020/1/add1 as orally revised, on the understanding that further adjustments will be made, if necessary, during the session. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. Following the approval of the proposed modalities and the provisional organisation of work as orally revised, I appeal to all speakers to adhere strictly to the time limits for statements during the general discussion. Please note that microphones will be automatically muted in case the speaker exceeds the time limit. And I thank you in advance for your cooperation. I also take this opportunity to remind delegations that the deadline for the submission of draft proposals to the Secretariat is tomorrow, Tuesday the 9th of February at 3 p.m. We'll now move on to agenda item 3, I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 3, entitled Follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly, and its sub-item A, entitled Socially Just Transition Towards Sustainable Development, the Role of Digital Technologies in Social Development and the Well-being of All, and sub-item B, entitled Review of Relevant United Nations Plans and Programs of Action Pertaining to the Situation of Social Groups. The documentation under this agenda item is listed in today's Journal of the United Nations. I now give the floor to Ms. Daniela Bass, Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, to introduce the documents under Agenda Item 3 and its sub-items A and B. Ms. Bass, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, of course it's an honor to introduce 5 reports of the Secretary General to the 59th session of the Commission for Social Development in my capacity as the Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. First, I would like to draw your attention to the Agenda Item 3, follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly. Sub-item A, and the priority theme is a socially just transition towards sustainable development and the role of digital technologies on social development and the well-being of all. Then there will be, as Madam Chair said, a high-level panel discussion on this item scheduled for this afternoon, an interactive dialogue with senior officials of the UN system for Wednesday afternoon, and a multi-stakeholder forum for Friday afternoon. Now, the report of the Secretary General contained in document E/CN5/2021/3 is a submitted for this item, showing that the current trajectory of economic development has led to high and rising inequalities in many countries, the climate crisis and unsustainable consumption and production patterns. Now, looking to the future, the report calls for inclusive, equitable, resilient, and sustainable development. And the report underlines the effective social protection systems and the role they play in facilitating a socially just transition to sustainable development. The report further examines the opportunities and risks brought by digital technologies for achieving the objectives of social development and the 2030 Agenda. You see, the digital revolution has already brought tremendous benefits, for example, by improving access to healthcare through e-health, improving access to education through remote learning. The report, though, warns that half of the world's population does not use the internet. And already disadvantaged groups are overrepresented in the offline population, which is disproportionately female, rural, poor, elderly, and with limited education and low literacy. The report therefore stresses that leaving no one behind means leaving no one offline. Furthermore, the report highlights that closing the digital divide really requires working on many fronts: improving access to ICT for infrastructures, affordability, investing in digital skills, improving awareness of the benefits of being connected, and providing relevant content, of course, in local languages. And finally, the report concludes with recommendations on pathways and policies to support the socially just transition to sustainable development, to close the digital divide, promote digital inclusion, achieve universal connectivity, and strengthen digital governance and partnerships. So, the present, current trajectory of economic development equals to high and rising inequalities. The future, need for more inclusive, equitable, resilient, and sustainable development. The solutions, effective social protection systems, digital technologies for all, by closing the digital divide. Now, I would like to move to the second Secretary General report. It's the one related to NEPAD, and the title is The Social Dimension of the New Partnerships for African Development, and you will find it contained in a document E/CN 5/2021/2 that reviews the socio-economic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis in Africa and the response of African countries and their partners, including the United Nations system. The report shows that the crisis has reversed hard-won development gains, such as poverty and gender inequality reduction. But it also offers an opportunity to promote a paradigm shift and reset socioeconomic policies for a better recovery for all. So the report urges African countries to continue prioritizing policies that improve the health sector, to eradicate extreme poverty. And also when it comes to the impacts of COVID in widening inequalities. So we have to combat inequalities, in particular gender inequality, and provide quality education and decent jobs for all in order to recover better from this pandemic, as well as to accelerate the inclusive growth during the UN Decade of Action and Delivery. And then it also calls on the United Nations system to turn the COVID-19 crisis into a possibility to galvanize efforts towards the accelerated and coherent implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the African Union 2063 by leveraging the UN network of regional, sub-regional, and country teams, and by promoting coordination through the UN Intra-Department Task Force on African Affairs and the joint AU-UN Development Framework. Therefore, present, crisis has reversed hard-won development gains. Future, promote a paradigm shift and reset socioeconomic policies. Solutions, prioritize policies to improve health sector, economic extreme poverty reduction, combat inequality, provide quality education and decent jobs for all, accelerate inclusive growth during the UN Decade of Action and Delivery. Madam Chair, let me now go to the third Secretary General report entitled Review of Relevant UN Plans and Programs of Action Pertaining to the Situation of Social Groups. And here I'm making reference to the Secretary General report on policies and programs related to youth. When it comes to this group, youth, you will find the recommendations and our policy analysis in document E/CN 5/2021-5, and it is submitted pursuant to the Commission for Social Development Resolution E/CN 5/2019/L3. In this report, you will see that it provides an update on the implementation of the resolution through an analysis of three thematic issues that are linked to the World Programme of Action for Youth and currently are really impacting youth. And namely, they are youth poverty alleviation, digital global economy, and youth and criminal justice, as per the resolution. So highlighting progress and developments in those three areas, including the impacts of COVID-19, the report provides an analysis of these three thematic issues, covering research, policies, and initiatives undertaken by member states and also by the United Nations entities and by youth-led or youth-focused organizations as part of the implementation of the World Programme of Action for Youth and, of course, of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And it also contains very interesting resolutions. Present, analysis of three thematic issues: youth poverty alleviation, digital global economy, youth and criminal justice. Future, youth engagement, more and more. Solutions, you will find them in the report. The next Secretary General report I would like to draw your attention to is the one related to the implementation of the objectives of the International Year of the Family and its follow-up processes, which you will find contained in document A/75/61-E 2021/4. So this report provides a preliminary analysis of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on families. It highlights a variety of family-oriented responses focusing on parental leave and care services, as well as financial and utility supports. So efforts, of course, have been made to protect women from apparent surge in domestic violence. However, the responses have been uneven and often inadequate, with only 1/3 of countries taking action to support unpaid care and strengthen care services for children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. And the report also cites the recent review of family-oriented priorities, policies, and programs, as reported in the voluntary national reviews during the period from 2016 to 2019. And the review of the voluntary national reviews indicates that family-oriented policies are still not considered an integral part of the overall development efforts as they should be. Now, finally, the report recommends policies and legislation banning all forms of violence against children, including corporal punishment. It emphasizes that such policies should be accompanied by positive parenting education programs and public education campaigns on children's rights. As part of the preparation of the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family 2024, the report recommends to focus on research and awareness-raising activities at national, regional, and international levels, and to also look at how technologies impact demographics impact the issue of family, urbanization, mitigation, and climate change trends. How are they impacting on families to harness their positive effects and mitigate the negative impacts? Present, uneven and often inadequate responses of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on families. Future, support unpaid, strengthen care services for children, older persons, persons with disabilities, protect women from an apparent surge in domestic violence. Solutions? Banning all forms of violence against children, promote positive parenting education programs, public education campaigns on children's rights, and harness the positive effects and mitigate the negative impacts of technological, demographic, as well as other issues that I just mentioned in the briefing. Finally, lastly, Madam Chair and distinguished delegates, I introduced the note by the Secretary General under Agenda Item 3C, Emerging Issues, and the year's theme is Social Policy to Promote a More Inclusive, Resilient, and Sustainable Recovery, Building Back Better post-COVID-19 for the achievements of the 2030 Agenda in the context of the Decade of Action and Delivery for Sustainable Development. And the note will be found in document E/CN5/2021/4. This note provides an overview of the social impact of COVID-19 in the areas of poverty, employment and decent work, inequality and social exclusion, with focused attention to the situation of people hit the hardest during the crisis, including women, older persons, youth, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, migrant workers, and in general, people living in poverty and those engaged in vulnerable jobs. And it highlights how the crisis has reversed years of gains in fight against extreme poverty and created a new category of poor, more urban, young, better educated, and less likely to work in agriculture. So the note highlights the consequences of the crisis of the world of work and the devastating impacts on workers in the informal sector, which often lacks any form of social protection. And it represents 60% of the global workforce, and particularly on low-skilled, low-wage workers, and women, and youth, and individuals with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and migrants. So the note further provides an overview of fast-acting social policies and temporary social protection measures undertaken by governments to limit the socioeconomic consequences of the crisis on poverty, employment, and social inclusion. And you see, although crucial in lessening the devastating effects of the crisis, these temporary measures are not enough to address the root causes of inequalities and vulnerabilities. So therefore, in the report, you will see that it advocates for a new social contract to build back better based on the promotion of equal opportunity and access to social services, on strengthening labor institutions, including labor regulations, employment contracts, and innovative forms of collective agreement, and on the promotion of more equitable fiscal and monetary policies to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems, including floors. Present, situation of people hit the hardest during the crisis? Well, women, older persons, youth, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, migrant workers, people living in poverty, and those engaged in vulnerable jobs. Future, equal opportunity, innovative forms of collective agreement, appropriate social protection systems, the solution, a new social contract. Thank you, Madam Chair and distinguished delegates. This concludes my introduction of the reports prepared for this commission. I wish you all a very important session and fruitful session. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development for her statement. I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 4, entitled United Nations, the Draft Plan for 2022, and B, entitled the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. In today's United Nations Journal, we see the documents relating to this agenda item. I therefore invite the Commission to begin by considering agenda item 4A, and I give the floor to the Director of the Division for Social Development of UNDESA, Ms. Daniela Bass. I would like to ask Ms. Bass to try to focus to give time for questions in case there are some. Ms. Bass, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, I'm ready to reply to any questions from the floor, if any.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baz. So I'll now give the floor to the members so that they can make their questions or comments on the presentation. Habla mucho.
Como no hay cuestiones sobre este tema,
As there are no questions on this agenda item, I give the floor back to Ms. Buzz to address agenda item 4A, proposed programme plan for 2022. You have the floor, Ms. Buzz.
en la última parte de su exposición,
In the last part of your presentation, you referred to the plan of work for 2022 generally. Would you like to go into further depth and detail on that? Yes, I would like to do that. I have a few brief things to present. But I do have a glitch with my iPad. I apologise. No problem, Ms. Bass, says the chair. So, what we can do, if you agree, is that we'll move on to the next agenda item and then we can come back to this agenda item. Thank you very much. So I now invite the Commission to consider sub-item 4B, United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, and I give the floor to Ms. Paul Ladd, Director of the Institute, to introduce the reports under this item. I would be grateful if Mr. Ladd could focus in his presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, excellencies, colleagues, and greetings from Geneva. I would like to report to you on 3 issues today. First, the research activities of the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or Unrest, in the period 2019 to 2020. Second, on nominations to the Unrest board. And third, the issue of Unrest broader governance. On the first, since 1963, Unrest has been the only United Nations organization devoted exclusively to social development research. The Institute's autonomous status enables it to shape debates and engage in policy dialogue, bringing diverse and often marginalized viewpoints to the table. We contribute to critical analysis and diversity in perspectives that help advance more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable development. We are proud of our network of researchers and practitioners that spans all regions of the world and has equal gender representation. In the reporting period, Unrest undertook and coordinated research under its 3 program areas: social policy and development, gender and development, and the social dimensions of sustainable development. In addition, we launched a new program in Bonn, Germany, that is focusing on research uptake linkages to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Through these programs, the work of the Institute addressed system-wide development priorities related to poverty reduction, inequality, social protection, gender equality, and the social drivers of sustainability. We paid particular attention to the principle of leaving no one behind, including in our work in 2020 on the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups. This analysed the impact of the pandemic and associated policy responses on vulnerable and potentially vulnerable groups. Other research areas covered in the report of the Commission include integrated solutions to protracted displacement, and in particular, the development of a theory of change for use by UNHCR and UNDP in their country operations, South-South migration and inequalities, universities and social inequalities in the Global South, the growing social and solidarity economy around the world, SSE, that integrates social and environmental objectives into its business model, the evolution of corporate reporting frameworks on sustainable development that more adequately reflect the social dimensions, and on analysing socially just transitions to climate change, intended to ensure that poor and vulnerable people around the world, those less responsible for climate change, are not made to endure the burden of its consequences. The diverse audience for this research includes governments, UN organisations, civil society, academia and development practitioners. The Institute is funded entirely through voluntary contributions and depends on the support of member states to ensure it can fulfil its core mandate and functions. The Institute and its board expresses gratitude to all its funding partners, including those that provide unearmarked institutional support, including Finland, Sweden and Switzerland. New institutional funding agreements were signed with Sweden and Switzerland in 2020, covering the period 2020 to 2022, while project financing more than doubled compared with the previous biennium. In this biennium, careful stewardship and greater cost recovery allowed for reserves to be rebuilt and investments made in research capacity, especially in our gender and development programme. Institutional funding cannot be guaranteed beyond this period, and so the Institute is currently exploring all avenues for sustainability beyond the end of 2022. Turning to nominations for the Unrest board, the Unrest board is comprised of notable academics in the fields of social policy, political science, law, economics and anthropology. Board members serve in a personal capacity. The term of office of the following two members, Ms. Saraswati Menon and Ms. Sylvie Dura, will expire on the 30th of June 2021. At this 59th session, the Commission is called upon to nominate two new board members as replacements for a 4-year term expiring on the 30th of June 2025. Those nominees are Mr. Olivier de Schutter, Professor of Law at the Université Catholique de Louvain, and currently the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. And secondly, Ms. Graziella Morey Silva, Associate Professor, Department of Anthropology and Sociology at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies. Turning lastly to the broader issue of Unrest governance, the Secretary General's bulletin that governs Unrest was issued by the UN Secretary General in 1963 when Unrest was established. It has not been updated since 1973 when a minor amendment was made. The Secretary General's bulletin is out of date in many dimensions, most notably on the rules, regulations and procedures of the UN that relate to human resources, anti-corruption and procurement. A new statute is therefore needed to strengthen Unrest governance and ensure consistency with the broader rules and regulations of the UN, and moreover, to allow Unrest to play its part in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The proposal that a new statute be developed and issued is made by the Secretary General in his note E/CN/5/2021/6. The Commission is asked to consider recommending to the Economic and Social Council that the Secretary General be authorised to prepare, in consultation with the Unrest Board, a draft statute that updates the Secretary General's 1963 bulletin and thereafter to promulgate the new statute. Thank you for your attention and thank you, Madam Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the Director of the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. Thank you for your statement. I now open the floor for the debate. If there are any questions for the Director of the Institute.
Okay. Agradezco la intervención.
I'd like to thank the director of the Institute for his statement. I take this opportunity to ask a question. I take this opportunity as the chair. I'd like to know what is the status of the assessment studies carried out by the Institute? I think this is something that might interest the audience here, both those here in the room and those on the internet. Where can we find the assessments carried out by the Institute? Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, you mean the research that we produce, the publications, or specific assessments?
Sí, me refiero.
I'm specifically referring to, well, I think that the research that you carry out is focused research. That is, states take the research and they make it effective in some way. They implement it. So I imagine that you follow up on that, because I understand that you are an institute with specially located research that has a specific impact in a certain country. So how do you follow up on the work that you do, your research? How do you see the impact of your research in member states? If there is no assessment, what is the follow-up of the relation between your work and the member states and the impact of your work in the member states? Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, of course. We invest significantly in monitoring and evaluation of research uptake. The first structure that we use internally is a results-based management log frame, which tracks not just the research that we produce, its uptake, its citations, but also how we do our research in terms of our network of academics around the world, including where they're from in the world, which regions, and also their gender. And then for each project, we typically track research for many years thereafter, because our research projects tend not to be in short-term duration. They tend to be of a duration whereby they filter also into training and in also policy change in the countries that are particularly interested in making progress on that issue. And beyond project-based assessments, we periodically conduct external and independent evaluations of Unrest's entire operations and on research in certain areas. And that typically involves independent surveys of our network of practitioners and academics, and also policymakers in government who utilize the research.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answer. So we'll now return to the director, Ms. Bass. Daniela, you have a few extra minutes to continue with your presentation. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and again, apologies. Now, when it comes to the providing a brief update to the Commission for Social Development on the proposed program plan of the Division for Inclusive Social Development of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs for the year 2022, please do note that no documentation will be provided at this time. The program plan and the strategic framework and proposed program of work are subject to the new annual program budget beginning in 2020, approved by the General Assembly in its resolution 72/266, including a new results framework, and their preparation of the 2022 annual program budget is scheduled to be finalized in the first half of 2021. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development. Thank you for your statement. I'd like to ask the room whether there are any questions or any comments on the presentation that's just made.
Muy bien.
Very well. Seeing no comments, we've come to the end of our programme of work for today. In accordance with our organisation of work, the general discussion of sub-items A and B of agenda item 3 will begin tomorrow, the 9th of February at 3 p.m. in an informal virtual meeting. This afternoon at 3 p.m, the Commission will hold a high-level panel discussion on the priority theme, Socially Just Transition Towards Sustainable Development, the Role of Digital Technologies in Social Development and the Well-Being of All. Also in an informal virtual meeting. Before adjourning the meeting, I would also like to call the attention of members to a letter circulated by the President of the Economic and Social Council on the 3rd of December 2020, which contains information regarding the Occupational Safety and Health Plan, including in the possibility of follow-up in the unfortunate and hopefully unlikely event of a COVID-19 case. Following the arrangements in recent meetings held at UN headquarters, the Secretariat of the Commission will manage the exit by calling for departure in a staggered manner. Members are therefore requested to remain seated after the adjournment of the meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much indeed.